The morning of her sister's grand opening, Hazel Donovan stood in the back corner of a restaurant she had paid for and wondered if she was invisible. Not literally. She knew she was there. She could feel the pressed linen of her blazer against her arms, could smell the garlic and rosemary drifting from the kitchen, could hear the clink of champagne flutes being arranged on the welcome table near the entrance. She was very much present. She had been present for all of it. The lease negotiations, the contractor meetings, the 3 a.m. phone calls when her sister cried about permits and inspections and a walk-in refrigerator that cost twice what they'd budgeted, but standing there watching Fiona move through the room like she owned it, which technically on paper she did. Hazel felt something shift quietly behind her sternum, like a door closing. "You're blocking the waitstaff," said a voice beside her. She turned. It was Fiona's husband, Craig Ashworth, in a new suit that Hazel was fairly certain she had also paid for, though indirectly, through the household expenses line item Fiona had added to the monthly draw 3 months ago. Hazel stepped aside. She smiled. She said, "Of course. Sorry." That was the thing about Hazel Donovan. She always said sorry first. She had been doing it her whole life, the apologizing, the stepping aside, making herself smaller so that Fiona could be larger. It had started when they were children, after their father left and their mother worked double shifts at the hospital, and Hazel, at 12 years old, had decided that someone needed to keep things steady. That someone had been her. Not because she was asked, because she looked at her little sister, 8 years old, gap-toothed, terrified, and thought, "I can fix this." She never stopped fixing things. She put herself through college on scholarships and weekend waitressing shifts, got a degree in accounting, then a second certification in financial planning. By 34 she had a modest but solid client base and a reputation for being the person who didn't panic. Fiona, 5 years younger and still finding her footing at 29, had always floated from one dream to the next. Fashion design, event planning, a brief and expensive attempt at flipping furniture. When she landed on restaurants, she said it with a certainty Hazel hadn't heard before. "I know this one is real," Fiona had told her, sitting across from Hazel at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around a coffee mug. "I can feel it." Hazel had looked at her sister's face, the earnestness there, the hunger, and thought, what the worst that could happen? She had since revised that question significantly. The investment was $115,000. Not all at once, it came in stages the way these things do. $30,000 for the down payment on the lease. $22,000 for the kitchen build-out after the contractor discovered the ventilation system needed replacing. $15,000 for equipment. $11,000 for staffing during soft launch. The rest in smaller pieces. Branding, a liquor license, 6 weeks of payroll while they waited for the reviews to come in. Hazel had tracked every dollar in a shared document that Fiona stopped opening around month 4. "You're so good at numbers," Fiona always said, which was her way of saying, "I don't want to think about this part." The restaurant was called Marigold. The concept was elevated comfort food, the kind of place where the mac and cheese cost $22 and came with truffle and a tiny sprig of something green. Fiona had excellent taste. That had never been in question. What Hazel had not fully accounted for was that taste and businesses were not the same muscle, and Fiona had only ever exercised one of them. Craig had come into the picture 18 months earlier, just as the restaurant idea was gaining traction. He was charming in the way that men are charming when they want something. Attentive, enthusiastic, full of opinions delivered as insights. He had worked in hospitality, he said. He understood the industry. He and Fiona had gotten married in a ceremony that Hazel had helped fund because Fiona had asked and because Hazel still somehow could not say no to that gap-toothed 8-year-old even when she was now a 29-year-old woman with a husband and a restaurant, and a habit of not answering emails about the shared financial document. The grand opening was on a Saturday in October. Hazel had dressed carefully, a charcoal blazer, dark slacks, the kind of outfit that said "I belong here" without being showy. She arrived 30 minutes early to help with last-minute setup, the way she always did, the way she had always done for every milestone in Fiona's life. Fiona had greeted her at the door with a hug that lasted exactly 2 seconds and then turned to answer a question from the florist. That was fine. It was a busy morning. The guests began arriving at 7. Food critics Hazel didn't recognize, friends of Craig's from what he called the industry, local influencers Fiona had courted for months. Hazel circulated, introduced herself to people, answered questions when someone asked if she was with the restaurant. "I'm Fiona's sister," she said. "Oh, are you on staff?" one woman asked. "No," Hazel said. I'm the investor." The woman smiled politely and moved on. At 8:15, Craig found her near the bar. "Hey," he said. He was not looking at her when he said it. He was looking over her shoulder at a table of men in expensive watches. "Listen, Hazel, we've got some VIP guests arriving at 8:30, and Fiona wants to make sure the energy is right." Hazel waited. It would be great, Craig said, still not meeting her eyes, if you could kind of hang back, maybe near the kitchen side. The vibe Fiona's going for is sort of curated, you know, and she wants to focus on the concept, not on, he paused, family stuff. Hazel heard the words. She processed them the way she processed all difficult financial news, calmly from a slight distance, the way you look at a fire from across the street. I'm so sorry, she said. You want me to stand near the kitchen? Just for the next hour or so, until the main guests are settled. She looked at him then, really looked, the way she hadn't bothered to before, because she had been too busy paying for things to look carefully at the people she was paying for. Okay, she said. She walked toward the kitchen side of the restaurant. She stood there for 4 minutes. Then she took out her phone. Fiona found her in the hallway near the restrooms at 8:40. Craig said you're being weird about the seating thing, Fiona said. She had her event face on, the bright brittle smile that meant she was performing. It's just optics, Hazel. You understand? Optics, Hazel agreed. I knew you would, you're always so. Fiona's eyes drifted toward the dining room. Practical Fiona, Hazel said. When you introduce Marigold tonight, how are you describing the ownership? What do you mean, to the guests, the press? How are you describing who owns this restaurant? Fiona's smile shifted just slightly. It's mine and Craig's restaurant. That's the story we're telling. It's cleaner. Cleaner, for branding purposes, 2 founders married couple elevated comfort concept, it's a narrative. She said the word narrative the way people say it when they've been taking marketing classes. You being in the mix as an investor complicates it. People ask questions. I invested $115,000, Fiona, and I'm so grateful, I've told you that. Her voice was patient, the same voice she'd used when Hazel was upset about the ventilation system cost. But this is a business and tonight is about the brand. Not about, you know. Hazel stood very still around her, the restaurant hummed. She could hear someone laughing loudly from the bar, and the sound of plates being stacked in the kitchen, and a jazz song she recognized but couldn't name. Okay, she said. Fiona exhaled with relief. I knew you'd get it. You always get it. She touched Hazel's arm briefly, the same way you touch a table for balance, and walked back toward the dining room. Hazel stood in the hallway for a moment longer. Then she went back to the bar, ordered a sparkling water, and made 3 phone calls. The first call was to her attorney, Ruth Voss, who had drawn up the investment agreement 14 months ago. An agreement that Fiona had signed, an agreement that specified Hazel's position as a minority stakeholder with defined rights, including the right to be identified as an investor in any public-facing materials related to Marigold LLC. Ruth picked up on the second ring because Ruth always picked up. Tell me what you need, Ruth said. Hazel told her. The second call was to the commercial bank that held the business line of credit. Hazel had personally guaranteed. She was not on the account in an operational sense. Fiona had made sure of that, in retrospect fairly deliberately, but she was the guarantor, which meant her credit, her name, her financial reputation was the reason the bank had extended it. She spoke to a representative and explained that she would be withdrawing the guarantee at the earliest possible opportunity as permitted under the terms. The representative was surprised. Hazel was not. The third call was to her accountant, who handled the LLC documentation. She asked him to begin the process of calling the shareholder loan, the formal mechanism by which Hazel's investment had been structured. Another document Fiona had signed without reading carefully, on the advice of Hazel's attorney, who had been very careful precisely because Hazel had quietly suspected that carefulness would be necessary someday. She had hoped she was wrong. She finished her sparkling water. At 9:15, Craig found her again. Fiona wants to know if you're staying for dinner service, he said. His tone had shifted. Less smoothly casual, more watching to see what you do. I don't think so, Hazel said pleasantly. Tell her the food was lovely, the truffle mac and cheese especially. She collected her coat from the hostess stand, thanked the young woman there by name. Her name was Becca. Hazel had remembered it from the soft launch and walked out into the October night. The air was cold and clean. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment and looked at the illuminated Marigold sign above the entrance. The warm light spilling through the front windows. The silhouettes of people inside laughing and eating and celebrating something that she had built. She breathed in. She breathed out. Then she went home. The calls started at 11:30 that night. Fiona first, then Craig, then Fiona again, then a number Hazel didn't recognize that turned out to be Craig calling from a restaurant landline. She let them all go to voicemail. She made chamomile tea and sat at her kitchen table and listened to the messages without returning any of them. Fiona's first message was confused. Hazel, Ruth called me? What's going on? Craig's message was not confused. Craig's message was angry, the kind of fast-pressured anger that comes from a man who expected things to work out a certain way and is realizing they might not. He used the word overreaction 4 times. Fiona's second message was crying. I don't understand what I did, I just wanted tonight to be clean. Why are you doing this to me right now? Hazel listened to that one twice. She thought about the 8-year-old with the gap teeth. She thought about their mother's hospital scrubs hanging in the bathroom. She thought about every phone call she had taken at 3 a.m., every spreadsheet she had built, every meeting she had attended, every check she had written. She thought about being told to stand near the kitchen. She picked up the phone and called Fiona back. I'm not doing anything to you, Hazel said when her sister answered. I'm protecting myself, by destroying everything I've worked for? I didn't destroy anything. You open tonight. The restaurant is standing. The reviews, if you got them, are on their way. None of that changes. What changes is that I'm no longer the invisible backstop for a business that just publicly pretended I didn't exist. It was one night, Hazel. One optics decision. It was $115,000 and 4 years of phone calls and the guarantee on your credit line, and my name on a shareholder agreement that you have never once read. It was not one optics decision. It was every decision you've made about what I'm for. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, that's not fair. I know you believe that, Hazel said. I'm sorry if it hurts to hear it differently. She waited a moment, then she said, Good night, Fiona. She hung up. She finished her tea. She sat in the quiet of her kitchen for a long time, not crying, not angry. Just sitting the way you sit after you've finally said the thing you've been not saying for years, and the relief of it is bigger than you expected and also exactly as big as you knew it would be. The legal process took 4 months. Ruth was precise and methodical. The shareholder loan call was legitimate. Fiona's legal counsel, once she retained one, confirmed as much, though not without considerable back and forth about whether Hazel was acting in bad faith. She was not acting in bad faith. She was acting in the bad faith of someone who had extended good faith for many years and finally stopped. The line of credit guarantee was withdrawn on the timeline permitted by the banking agreement. The bank reasonably required Fiona and Craig to either find a replacement guarantor or reduce the outstanding balance. They could not find a replacement guarantor because no one else in their lives had Hazel's credit profile or her inexplicable willingness to stake it on someone else's dream. They reduced the balance, which required liquidating some equipment. In the end, Marigold did not close. That had never been Hazel's goal. She had not done this to burn the restaurant down. She had done it to stop being the foundation it was built on without acknowledgement. And those were different things. What Hazel recovered after legal costs and the structured repayment schedule Ruth negotiated was $87,000, not the full investment. She had not expected the full investment. What she had expected was what she got. A fair accounting, a paper trail that finally meant something, and the end of being the person Fiona called at 3 a.m. The mediation was the last time she saw Craig. He shook her hand at the end of it with the stiff formality of a man who had expected a different outcome and was now recalibrating. She shook back. She wished him well and meant approximately 60% of it. Fiona she saw 3 weeks later, at a coffee shop they had used to meet at on Sunday mornings before the restaurant consumed everything. Fiona had asked and Hazel had decided to come. Not because she owed it. Because she wanted to look at her sister across a table one more time and see what was there. What was there was someone who looked tired. Someone who was learning, maybe for the first time, what it felt like to carry something without a safety net underneath. I'm not asking for anything, Fiona said. She was holding her coffee with both hands. I just wanted to see you. I know, Hazel said. I didn't realize. Fiona stopped, started again. I think I knew you would always be there, so I stopped seeing you. Does that make sense? It makes a lot of sense. I'm sorry. Hazel looked at her sister. She looked at the tiredness in her face and the trying in her posture and the remnant of the 8-year-old underneath all of it, gap-toothed and scared. I know you are, she said. They drank their coffee. They talked about small things. Their mother, a film Hazel had seen, a supplier problem Fiona was navigating. When they left, they hugged on the sidewalk, not the 2-second hug from the grand opening, a real one. Hazel did not know what came next with Fiona. She had stopped trying to predict it. What she knew was that she was no longer operating from the assumption that keeping her sister standing required her to disappear into the foundation. That was not love. She had finally understood. That was scaffold. And scaffolding that never gets credited is just something people step on. She used the recovered funds to do something she had been meaning to do for 6 years. She had a client, had worked with her for almost a decade. A woman named Bette Marsh who ran a small catering company and had been slowly, carefully building toward her own brick-and-mortar space. Bette was meticulous about money in a way that Hazel recognized and respected. She brought Hazel her books every quarter. She asked questions. She read every document she signed. Hazel invested $40,000. She negotiated the terms herself clearly without sentiment. Her name was in the operating agreement, publicly, in the first paragraph. The space opened the following spring. It was called Martian, Maine, and it seated 62. And on the night of the soft launch, Bet stood at the front of the room and introduced Hazel by name to every person there. None of this exists without her, Bet said simply, and that was all, and it was enough. Hazel stood in the room she had helped build and felt, for the first time in a very long time, entirely visible, not because someone had named her, but because she had stopped making herself easy to overlook. She raised her glass with everyone else. She smiled. She was done being the foundation that didn't get credited. She was ready to be part of what got built.